I usually just kind of jump right into these things. You know what? Before I do that, I'll let you introduce yourself. I'll just say I was just looking at a bunch of your posts and I was just laughing at some of these. They're fucking hilarious, man.
Yeah, it's ridiculous what people will believe.
It's good content. It is excellent content, man. So yeah, so like I said, I mean, generally I just like to make these things conversations. That's kind of like the thing I'm driving with, like you know, with the fighters. I have a couple I've already filmed that I haven't even released yet because they're so good that I'm like, God, I got to chop this down and kind of pull them together. Cause I get them talking about like, you know, like as an example, I got Dean Lister to tell a story about breaking the arm of a Mexican drug cartel member, you know, so like, but anyway, the whole point is just like, I just like to just make these loose, go where the conversation goes. And, you know,
that's cool with me, man. I'll just go with the flow.
Sounds good. All right. So why don't you introduce yourself to the people and let them know what you do?
Yeah, man. Well, my name's Rob. I run Mcdojo Life, which is a web entity. I guess you could say it's a brand where I call out fakes, frauds, and phonies and pedophiles in the martial arts industry.
Pedophiles. I must have missed that. I didn't get back on.
All the time. Quite often I have to do it. As a matter of fact, if you want to look at something really interesting, just Google martial art pedophile or martial art molestation into Google, and I guarantee you something within at least the last month has happened. Usually within the last week. And it's pretty ridiculous how often it happens.
That's crazy, especially given that I literally just put my daughter into Taekwondo. But you know, I don't think that any instructor is bulletproof. So you know.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. There's like over 450 confirmed cases of pedophilia in the martial arts from like 1987 to like 2018. There was like an entire website that did nothing but keep statistics of martial arts pedophiles. Like an entire website, that's all they were dedicated to. And like every week there'd just be somebody new every week. It's like, it's ridiculous.
What got you started? Like what was like the genesis of Mcdojo? Because it's a big page, man. For anybody who's just watching this and is unclear, I mean, like you have a ton of followers. I mean, like when I looked, I was like, Dana White follows you, Joe Rogan follows you, basically everybody follows you. So I was, so what got you started?
Well, I've been in the martial arts industry for 23 years now, and I've kind of run the gambit. You know, I started off like everybody else as a student, then I became an assistant instructor, an instructor. Then I opened my own martial arts studio. I was a heavy competitor. I've been doing martial arts business consulting now for like a decade. And like over the years, I've just kind of, transferred my energy from one subject of the arts to another. What do I want to be? What do I want to do with this? And I was a jiu-jitsu coach. So I was like a blue belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu at the time. I'm a purple belt now. Very mediocre, by the way. So I can't really toot my own horn there. But I enjoyed it. And so one day my instructor called me and he was like, hey man, can you do me a favor and cover me for this class? I'm not feeling well. So I was like, yeah, dude, no problem. I went in, I taught like 2 techniques, and then the rest of the time we sparred. And it was a noon class, so everybody kind of stayed and chit-chatted, and we shot the shit for a little while at the end of class. And there was a guy there who had only taken like 2 classes. It was like his second class in martial arts ever. Mm-hmm. And me and the other guys were talking, and we got on the subject of McDojos. And that word kept getting thrown around because that word's been around forever. Ever since I started martial arts, it's been a thing. And everybody was starting to leave except for that guy. And he stayed, and he tapped me on the shoulder, and he kind of pulled me back a little bit. He goes, hey, man, I'm a little embarrassed, but you guys were talking about this. I don't know what that is. Could you possibly explain that to me? And so I explained what now has become kind of the basis of what my rules are for a McDojo and the rules I use for the page. And he had one question for me. He goes, well, how come no one does anything about that? And I was like, in my head, I'm like, that's a fantastic question. Like, there's no regulating body to the martial arts. It does not exist. And so you have little regulating bodies, right? But as a whole, as martial arts as a whole, does not have any regulating body. And so that night I went home and I kept thinking about it over and over and over again. And the next day I just started. I started doing my research, started figuring out what I could and couldn't get away with in terms of slander and libel. Found out that apparently there was a website that was called Mcdojo that did get sued by McDonald's, to my knowledge.
Oh, got
And
sued
so,
by McDonald's. I thought you were going to say get sued by like the masters that they exposed.
no. Like I have yet to have that happen. Like no, but McDonald's because they took the McDonald's logo and they turned it into
Oh, okay, yeah,
Mcdojo, and
yeah,
it was
yeah.
like which I'm not gonna lie. When I first started Mcdojo life, that was the logo that I used, but I was able to get away
That's a
with it.
standard go-to. You know.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
then I was like, you know what? Like, if I'm gonna make a serious run at this, it can't be just cheese. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? There's got to be a purpose and a reason behind doing this. And so over the years, it's kind of taken its own life and shape. And I have been very fortunate to have a lot of influential people in the martial arts back what I do. And I'm nothing but grateful for that because this is my full-time job now.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So you no, so McDojo's full time. Like, so you figured out ways to monetize the brand, and that's
Yeah. And luckily, like I've been able to do so with the weirdest thing. I make most of my money off of consulting work. And so like I keep getting this question, and I've been doing consulting work anyway. Like I've helped martial arts studios grow and build and give them advice over the years because I've just been doing it for so long.
yeah,
And it seems like the funny part about the word McDojo is a lot of people use that word to basically call out dojos that are financially successful. So it's like if you're financially successful, the guy across the street will call you a McDojo. That's how it always is in the martial arts. There's so much hate in the martial arts against anybody who does anything other than what you do. And it's the
yeah,
funniest thing. It's like, oh, well, if you don't do what I do, it's not real. It's
yeah,
like, well, that's not necessarily true. It's just different. Like
yeah,
sometimes it's like goal. Like if your
yeah,
goal is to be like Bobby Badass and you want to get into the ring and beat people up, you can do that. That is an option. That's a path you can take. But if you just want to do it for fun, you could do that. If you want to do it because you want to lose weight, you could do that. If you want to be a stunt performer, you could do that. Like there's
yeah.
so many avenues to be successful in the martial arts, but yet everybody who's a fighter makes fun of everything else other than fighting. Meanwhile, the people who make the most financially are not the ones who are good fighters. The best, highest paid martial artists are the ones who are doing stunt work. The guys who, if you ever went to a karate tournament, everybody would call them karate fags when I was younger.
Yeah. Like
Or
they're
kata
like doing
fags.
like
Like,
spinning kicks to like kick
yeah,
board. You're like, that's
yeah,
not gonna work, dude.
yeah, but it might not work, but those people are financially successful and we know
Yeah,
their names.
yeah,
And so I think that that's funny is like 90% of fighters will make fun of that, but then their careers will peter and go nowhere. The elite 10%, sure, they'll make it somewhere, right? But that other 90% that focus so much on fighting people, they get an injury, they tear an ACL, they hurt their back, they wind up getting injured, they wind up getting neck injuries, things broken, like me. If I could have gone back and chose a different path other than wanting to fight, I would have hardcore went back and told myself, don't do the fighting route. Go get paid. Like it's so much better that way,
yeah.
and you could be legit and be theatrical, but the problem is that most people don't know how to separate the two in their mind. So you have to be legit at the same time, where if you're theatrical, it's called bullshit. It's not true.
That's why guys like Sean O'Malley are so popular. It's like you figured out a way to be theatrical and simultaneously be vicious in the octagon.
Exactly, or guys like Raymond Daniels, Michael Venom Page. These
Yeah,
guys are Stephen
100%.
Thompson.
Yeah,
These are elite level point fighters. And if you've ever been, in the circuit or whatever, most guys who do like full contact kickboxing, MMA, Muay Thai make fun of karate point fighters. Like, oh, that's a game of tag. Okay, then they fight Raymond Daniels or Stephen Thompson or Michael Venom Page and they get knocked unconscious because a point
Lyoto
fighter.
Machida was Lyoto Machida a point fighter too?
No, he was Kyokushin. So it was like same thing with not Kyokushin. He had Leo Machida style karate, but GSP was Kyokushin. And so like it wasn't necessarily point fighting. It's like more hardcore, rough and tumble type karate, but still, like we make fun of all these point fighters, but then they grow up to be like the next level of fighter because they can hit you first. They might not hit you the most, but they're damn sure gonna hit you first. And they've discovered how to knock people out by doing that.
Yeah, their heel hits your gut and suddenly they're not so funny anymore.
And then your liver shoots out of your butthole. And you're like, oh God, why?
Yeah, it's funny. Like
Tyrone Woodley was smart though, Tyrone Woodley was smart. He brought in all those elite level point fighters when he fought Stephen Thompson. He beat Stephen Thompson.
Yep. Yeah. And it's funny you bring him up because, like Woodley is in not to just completely transition over to actual MMA, like on the front side, but I was just reading this morning about how he's going to fight Colby. It's the biggest fight of his career, which, I don't know if that's necessarily accurate. It's certainly very important for his current status career. How much do you watch? Do you follow UFC pretty heavily or no?
I'm like, I guess you could say I'm a middle ground guy. Like I follow the people that I choose to follow that are important to me. Usually, not gonna lie now, usually I just tend to follow people who follow my page. So I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, thanks for the support. I'll support you this weekend and watch your fight.
So who do you like?
Man, I come from a sport karate background when I started, and I transitioned into kickboxing, and I've been doing jujitsu and helping guys with striking for MMA, or I did before this became my full-time job.
Yeah.
So like I always gear towards sport karate guys. I always go towards the Stephen Thompsons. I like Anthony Pettis, his brother. I like anybody out of Rufus's camp because Duke Rufus has that transition in which I respect, where he comes from a more flashy karate background or kickboxing background. And of course, the legendary story with Rick Rufus and the Muay Thai fight where he got carried out on a stretcher.
Yeah, and then he flipped it around.
Yeah, and then they started doing, but that's why their fighters are so unique. Like if you look at those fighters, they all have their own flavor, and it's because they encourage that. They encourage that flavor, and I love watching anybody who comes out of that camp because you can see night and day differences, between the styles because it's encouraged for them to be themselves.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, that's a story that I like about, that is the coolest thing about mixed martial arts is people who watch it now don't really understand that the genesis of the sport was about, let's see which martial arts actually work in practice, and how you almost have guys now where it's not, they have like something that's their base martial art, but they've developed all these other skills because, like Joe Rogan always talks about how he was a competition black belt in Taekwondo. And then when he started sparring guys who were kickboxers, he was getting his ass kicked. And so he had to develop better boxing. But, you watch this guy kick a bag, and if he kicked you, you die. I mean, like literally.
It's hard for sure.
Yeah. And I just think what's important in martial arts, if you want to be good, is you just have to leave your ego completely at the door. Like I bring that up like today because last week I was bringing my daughters to Taekwondo. Like I was saying, I was just signing them up, a 4-year-old, my 7-year-old. And the guy was, he's doing an assessment on them. And I'm like, maybe I should just do this just so I can learn, because I did kickboxing, but I'm like, maybe I should do this like to learn Taekwondo. And so the guy does like an assessment on me, and he's like, look, like, he's like, I would just start you like at a high yellow belt, but like, still on the beginner side, so I can teach you basics around how to, like specifically how to do Taekwondo kicks, because yours are all, it's completely different style.
Yeah.
And I'm like, absolutely. And then I asked him like a million questions, and I'm like excited to go into a beginner Taekwondo class because I really want to learn how to do the specific, like, I want to learn how to do a spinning back kick the way that Joe Rogan does it, or like, just because Taekwondo, they have so many kicks that there's I mean, I can make it look semi half decent if I took a day to figure it out. But like, I'm like excited to take classes. I'm excited to take a beginner Taekwondo class,
Yeah, man, it's always exciting to be able to strap on a white belt again and go back in and learn something new. Like, I think that, again, that's a little bit of an issue in the arts, is so many people, and like people accuse me of this, which is funny because when I post a video clip, right, I post the clip. I post 30 seconds to a minute worth of a clip. And I don't even really add too much of my own opinion to the clip. I add like maybe a sentence that's usually a joke about what it is that we're looking at. Then I'll go all the way to my YouTube channel and actually do a complete breakdown of those videos. Who did this, how they did it, why they did it, what's the style, what's the idea behind the premise of what they're doing. And usually at the end of most of my videos, I'll say, but I could be wrong. If you would like to talk to me about this, maybe you can come to me and talk to me live. People watch like maybe, if I post a 5-minute clip, they'll maybe watch 2 minutes. And then once they hear what they heard, they'll be like, oh God, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, I'm very much a white belt mentality. I think that there's a ton of stuff that I don't know, but I think there's a ton of stuff that's dangerous if you look at it and you try to teach it a very specific way.
Yeah.
And that's how people get hurt. It's very wise to be a white belt in things, right? To take a look and go, well, let's learn more about this. But once I learn enough about something, I should be able to make an educated opinion on it without like people going, well, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, of course, there's tons of stuff I don't know what I'm talking about. Teach me. But then their vaginas start to get real sandy around that time. And when I offer them to talk to me like we're talking now, kind of face to face, they always bitch up.
Yeah.
never actually come on and actually speak with me so we can have an open dialogue and learn from each other. It's very interesting.
I talk about that all the time. Like, cause like I'll I'll say something on YouTube and someone will put something in the comments and I'm like, and I just can't help myself. The next time I do a video, I'll just directly be like, hey, in my entire life, no one has ever spoken to me like that in person. Why do you think that is? Do you think that if you were standing right next to me, would ever say something like that? And if the answer is no, then maybe when you're typing, restructure the way that you speak. Like read what you're writing and then go, oh, okay, like would I say this to this person in person? Probably not. Here's how I would actually say it if I was going to say it, and like go like that. And honestly, like my comment section has dramatically shrunk in terms of people who do that, just because. And also I've tried to like kind of create an environment where I'm like, look, this is a channel for people who actually pay attention to sport, understand this. Like, it's not a place for people to yell at each other. Like that's not what this is about. Like, let's have reasonable, and that really has actually kind of weeded out the people who want to just come in and start shit, like it's so dumb.
I stopped arguing with people online. Like I'll usually go back and forth once, maybe twice, if it seems like the person has good intentions.
Yeah.
So like if the person actually has something, then I'm like, oh, well, maybe that's valid. Then after that, if they want to continue an argument, my answer is always the same. I go live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on Instagram at 9 a.m. Eastern time. You're more than welcome to continue this discussion there. And like they want to continue, it's like, look, dude, you don't have a profile picture. You haven't posted anything. You haven't put yourself out there. So what I've noticed though is it's a way for people to vent, and so they feel like maybe you're that out of reach that they can vent to you and it won't have repercussions. But like one of my first viral videos, the first viral video I ever had, right? It was like #1 post on Reddit at the time, was this dude who was actually somebody that I actually knew from like a mutual friendship. And he was talking shit on my Facebook page at the time, my actual Facebook page, not knowing that I ran Mcdojo Life, which at the time, granted, wasn't nearly as big as it is now. And he started basically, I was teaching jiu-jitsu at the time, and I was offering people, any female who wanted to come in and just try a class. It was completely free. See if it's something that they would enjoy for self-defense. And I had a lot of comments. People were like, yeah, you'll love it. People who were my current clients at the time, current students, and new people who wanted to join to try it out. And this guy got on a rampage about how no woman could ever beat a man in self-defense, in a self-defense situation.
That's utter nonsense.
Yeah, well, yeah, because I've gotten my ass beat by women like over.
Yeah, that's fucking ridiculous. Only a person who doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about would say that.
He's never seen Gabby Garcia or Chris Cyborg,
or ever just rolled with a black belt female in jiu-jitsu. Like they're gonna, if they'll annihilate you every time.
Well, because it's a very much, like, I'm not going to sit here and say that size doesn't matter, because I don't believe that. Size does matter. There's a reason athletic competitions have weight classes. You know what I'm saying? If size didn't matter, they wouldn't have weight classes. So it does matter. It's just not the only thing that matters.
100%.
Same thing with aggression, technique, any attributes, speed, timing, coordination. There's so many things that go into making a good fighter that you can't just throw out a generalization like there is no woman who could ever beat a man. That's just bullshit. That's like, that's like, I don't know, that comparison was just asinine. So I argued with him the point. And finally it got to the point where I was like, I know so many fighters right now, so many female fighters who would be willing to shut him the fuck up. I offered him a challenge. I said, you know what? I'll get you a fighter if you say you'll take the fight. And he agreed. He said, you'll never find a fighter, but I agree. So he didn't know. So I went over to because he didn't know I ran Mcdojo Life. So I just put up 2 G's of my own money. I was like, all right, here's the conversation. You know what? I'm going to shut this dude up. Here's $2,000 of my own money. I'm willing to pay out anybody who'd be willing to spar this dude. And then, of course, I had my inbox blew up. And then
I bet.
It became this huge story. Like, I didn't know it was going to, I was just looking to talk to this pool of people. Next thing you know, I had all these now very famous fighters sending me all this information. I was like, holy shit, people really want to be disaster. We finally did make it happen, and I did wind up posting it. But it's amazing how keyboard warriors, right?
Wait, which girl took it?
Tara LaRosa, who was like a MMA female pioneer. At one time, I think she went 15-0 in her career. Oh, she worked him. And it was the strangest, most surreal thing though, because in the fight, It was MMA unified rules. It was just standard MMA rules, right? And it was so interesting. We had a lot of hiccups getting there as well. Like our first original location got shut down by the state athletic commission. They were upset. They thought things were going to be different than they were and blah, blah, blah. So we had to reschedule it.
Don't expect the athletic commission to actually understand fighting. You know, you're like, you got a professional against like a dude, like, did this dude train?
Well, the thing is like the dude wasn't trained, but she was no longer professional. She hadn't fought in like 2 years, like our year longer than that. She hadn't fought in forever. And so like, it was just,
he was wholesale untrained. Like he had
he had no fucking idea what he was doing. He had no clue what he was doing. Yeah, he was talking out his ass the whole time. Now, what he did do, he tried to like be sneaky, and he had a friend of his who was like in jiu-jitsu, and they rolled a lot beforehand. But that was him like training. Like it defeated the purpose of the experiment. The entire experiment was, could an untrained man beat a trained female? Because that's the whole point.
Yeah.
And he lost twice. He lost first to cardio. He tapped when he got this. She got him in side control. Now, granted, it was like maybe 3 or 4 minutes in, and then he tapped to cardio. And then I was like, yo, dude, you're not going to stop here. I was like, you talked all that shit. All these people had to wait for this to happen. I was like, you're going to go back in until there's a submission. Then, because he watched an Eminari roll on YouTube one time, he thought that he could pull it off during the fight. So he dives into this like flailing Eminari roll that looks nothing like an Eminari roll. And then she winds up getting him in an armbar. And then like afterwards, rather than doing the thing that he probably should have done, we all agreed, we all made it happen. There was a session that happened, right? But rather than him owning up to the fact that he lost, he kept sticking with, well, I almost had her. Almost is horseshoes and hand grenades, brother. There is no almost. You either did or you didn't. And you lost not once, but twice after all that shit talk. And it was amazing.
Put you in an armbar. There's nothing almost about it. You lost. I mean, that's a decisive loss. It's like her knocking you unconscious and then waking up and being like, I almost had her. There's no difference. Like
exactly. Well, because like she right off the gate, she slips. So like if you watch, like she goes to take a step and she slips and falls. It was just like a fluke. And so he freaks out and runs and tries to get into a rear naked choke.
You gotta send me the clip because I'll edit it into this
I'll send it to you. It's all on our YouTube. Like it's ridiculous. But she slips and he dives in trying to get a rear naked choke. But he gasses himself out. And she is a true pro. She waits. She just waits. She could feel him squeezing and she's just real relaxed and calm. And then finally they work their way up to the feet to like against the wall. And they don't like hate each other. This is an experiment. They do want to win for fucking sure. But they don't like hate each other.
Dude, she's representing all female fighters.
Yeah, exactly, right? So she's having a great time in there. Like she's actually enjoying it. And then he kind of lets out like a little bit of a laugh because I think that he understood that he was in for more than he bargained for when the rear naked choke didn't work. Then all of a sudden he gets caught in side control and he taps to just cardio. He goes, I can't breathe. That's the funniest shit ever.
Dude, that's such a great story because like this is an argument that I have been. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've pioneered this exact argument where, like, I remember the first time I ever really got into it with people over it was back when Gina Carano was fighting, and I was talking to one of my buddies who, you know, he played college football, and I mean, listen, like, he's a big, strong dude, so like, I might have been pushing it with Gina versus him. He's like 265 or something, you know.
Yeah.
But I was just breaking his balls, or I'm like, she'd fuck you up, dude. But you know, in all honesty, like, I mean, someone who doesn't have 135 pounds and isn't a college athlete on a professional female fighter, dude, like, you're gonna get worked, especially in the ground game. And so, you know, again, I've gotten into it a million times. And then when I had Dean on, I asked him that same thing. I was like, I'm like, so settle this once and for all. As the 3-time Abu Dhabi champion, if a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu female, call it 130 pounds, ends up in a real life altercation with, call it a 190-pound, completely untrained man who's halfway athletic, does the man, like, who's going to win? He's like, the women will win 100% of the time. He's like, the guy will have no chance against her. And I was like,
yeah, well, because it's like an understanding, like the jiu-jitsu is like such a game of where to put what when. You know, it's like, okay, if I put my hand here, it's going to open up these doors and close these doors. If I put my leg here, it opens up these doors and closes these doors. But if you don't know what door to go through, you're going to go through the wrong door. And that's how jujitsu works. So like if you put your arm in the wrong place, now you're arm barred. You put it in the right place, now you're not arm barred. It's just a matter of going through the proper doors. And that's what jiu-jitsu allows you to do. It opens up more doors for you to have more options, but it also gives you a very direct path to go from point A to point B. You know, like the very interesting thing. Oh, by the way, just to touch on a little side note, since we were talking about that troll versus MMA fighter thing, they didn't wind up really throwing any strikes, which there was a reason behind it. So like she was like, his only chance of beating me, because she knew jujitsu, his only chance of beating me is to get a lucky hit, is to knock me out. So she was like, I don't want to engage him in striking because he might knock me out. There's a chance there, right? So I'm going to just shoot in and go old school Gracie jujitsu, shoot in, get to a dominant position, and win from there. He put himself in a shitty position because everyone hated him by the time they actually got to the fight. I mean, the internet.
He's the dude fighting a girl, of course.
Exactly. So everybody hated him. So he was like, man, I think it's going to make me look bad if I hit her. And I was like, well, you're a fucking moron for all of this, but it's up to you. Like, it's unified. You can do whatever y'all want, right? It's up to you. And so he doesn't wind up striking because he was like, you know what? I'm just going to prove, literally his words were to me, he goes, I'm going to prove that jiu-jitsu doesn't work by overpowering her.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like I actually, that last part makes me have a minuscule bit of respect for the guy, because he actually is correct in that it's like, okay, so what's more important, right? Like winning this thing and absolutely annihilating your reputation, or just losing and kind of taking it like a man. Now, he fucked up the last part, but like, you know, if he would have blitzkrieged the girl and just put one on her chin and knocked her out, I mean, that's not it.
You know, she's not. They were the same weight class. She's not new to this. Like
they're the same weight class.
Yeah.
I was visualizing a huge size mismatch. I mean,
it was like because for the experiment, we wanted them to be about the same weight.
Yeah.
We wanted it to be okay. Well, if you fought somebody who was about your same size, age, weight, temperament.
Yeah.
But they were training, you were not. Could they? Because then you run into excuses. We didn't want excuses. Oh, well, he was so much better. Blah blah. No excuse. It was very simple, plain, clean cut. This is the weight I was looking for. I found it, and she beat him. But you know,
imagine if it would have been an active. Wait, what year was this in?
It's like a couple of years back, man. I mean, fuck it. It was been a while ago now. I have to look it up.
So this one is, she's 2 years off, probably coming off the couch, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe even more than 2 years off. But I know she had not trained. Even her coach, who was the coolest guy ever.
They're all cool, man. Yeah, all you martial arts guys are cool, because you just.
And he was like, look, I don't think this is a good idea, but this is what she wants to do. I'm her coach. I'm gonna be there, you know. And I was like, I have to respect that. But he was a super cool guy, and you know, he was just like, you know, before the fight, he didn't talk about her training at all. But then after the fight, he was like, he straight up told her, he was like, I really wish you would have trained for this. But after it was done, I was like, you didn't even train for this. And meanwhile, this guy has been training purposely over and over and over again. So we're talking somebody who had not been training for a while, not really been putting in the effort for what should have been put in for a fight, and then faces this guy who has been putting in all the effort and still gets worked over. I mean, I think that's hilarious.
Yeah, and I'm so like that. I can't tell you how happy that makes me that you did that, just because, again, like I said, I've been a proponent of your side of that argument forever. And again, imagine if he would have fought like Holly Holm, you know, like someone who's like actively active.
Yeah.
Because she
would have threw hands easy. She would have had no problem like with that. She would have just kicked him in the face.
Yeah, 100%. Especially if they're the same size. I mean, like, you know, it's funny, like with female fighters, when I watch them in the UFC, it's like if you're watching like the number 7 fight the number 10, there's a very, very noticeable difference in speed between the females and the males, like, you know, at the same weight class. But like when you go to the very top, like you watch Amanda Nunes fight and you compare her to people that are, you know, like, I mean, Amanda Nunes, Valentina Shevchenko are really like the two that it's really obvious where you're like, man, they move like basically the same speed. Like Amanda Nunes, she could knock a dude out for 100% sure. if she
we
landed.
talk about attributes. Attributes play a role. Like there is a difference between a male physique and a female physique.
Absolutely.
There is a difference in timing, speed, there's a lot of differences. I'm not saying that those differences don't exist, but I am definitely saying that that martial arts has an impact on the fight. Technique has an impact on the fight. So if one person has trained, that means they have technique. That means they have some skill to back up whatever attributes that they have. Meanwhile, the other person only has attributes. They don't have that technique and skill. So they're just using attributes, hoping that'll overcompensate for technique. And I'm not saying that those people don't win. I mean, shit, you can see it all the time where some Taekwondo dude, not making fun of all Taekwondo people, I'm just saying some Taekwondo people will get their black belt in like 2 years and they've been brainwashed to believing that they're just Billy Badass. And then they'll go into some bar and some dude who's never trained a day in his life will just clean the floor with them because his attributes overpower that person's technique because they're missing things like aggression, and like talking about ego earlier, they can flip that switch on that ego and go, you know what? I'm going to fucking kill you. The honor, the respect, all that shit goes out of the window. Meanwhile, the other person's thinking, I will use my tech. Ow, fuck my head. Ow, you hit me again.
Dude, that's 100%. That's exactly what I was going to say is like, what I think that is if someone, if it's a person who's, who's actually had a lot of live experience and they've run through guys before, maybe a little bit of training, etc. If you take that and then you take someone who has no experience in a live scenario and then they go and they train Taekwondo, they get real good, they get their black belt. Okay, well, think about the scenario that you're fighting in there. It's like you're fighting under rules where both guys come in and they agree. Okay, so when we start fighting, we're gonna square up, and then we're gonna take our time. We're gonna pick our shots. And literally, so then they get squared up in the street and they've never been in a situation where there are no fucking rules. Like this guy, they're not going to square up with you and like take your time and pick your shots. They're going to literally just be on top of you immediately. And it's the first time they've probably ever faced that. If they're a Taekwondo trained in a controlled environment and never, ever.
Like Olympic style. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, I've seen like a lot of those videos, like if you go to like kind of like the, I don't know, like street beefs or anything, like where you could see a guy who has some training against a guy with no training, and then the guy with no training beats him. It always looks like that, where they're kind of like, they're looking for the guy to get set up, and then the guy's just on top of him immediately, and they're like, dude, I actually saw this guy on Street Beefs yesterday. I just randomly found that found that channel a couple days ago, and there's actually this one guy who's vicious, man. Like I'm going to forget his name, and this is going to be completely worthless that I'm even bringing it up, but he's like 8-0. He's good, man. He's a really, really good boxer. I was like, wow. And you watch him fight to fight get so much better. It's like, and you're talking like over about 4 months. And it's incredible how much a person can improve when they're really focused exclusively on what they're doing.
Yeah. Street Beefs is interesting the way that it operates. I always wondered, like, why is this legal? And, like, how the hell is this legal? This unsanctioned fighting. And then I realized, actually, we interviewed the guy, Scarface, the guy who runs it. And
the main guy who announces him?
Yeah, he's a super cool guy, man. He's real chill. Yeah, he's a nice dude. But they basically operate under the, what is it called? Mutual combat law. So.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So, like, basically, like if you're in which I don't think there are too many cities or states that actually have the mutual combat law. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 at most. But the mutual combat law just basically says that if you both agree, you can fight. All you have to do is just both agree. Like say, yo, are you cool with this? I am cool with this. Let's go old school Marcus of Queensberry and beat the shit out of each other.
Yeah. So the guy's name is Bad News. So like they put one up yesterday. And I had never seen, and this was like his 8th fight, or this is either his 8th or 9th win. But he was up against this guy, and the dude came out bombing, like, and very clearly knows how to fight. And he just waited him out, and I was like immediately I was like, wow, this is really high level for Street Beefs. This dude that he's up against, like, look at.
Oh yeah, man. I like that. He's taking his time. He's moving his head just in case. There you go. Nice.
Yeah. So you
showboating.
So you would think that the guy in the shirt is going to win, right? Because he looks really solid.
Nice.
So it's actually the other dude.
Yeah,
it's actually the black guy. Like he lets him tire himself out, And he has a 1-2 that's so fast, man. Like and he just, but like that guy clearly, you know, the guy that's punching there, I was like, okay, this is really high level for street beefs, you know. But that guy's actually an amateur MMA fighter, and that guy, Bad News, who's undefeated in street beefs, he just waited him out, let him get tired, and then he knocked him out. He's impressive.
I have this old video. It's like, you know, people give me a hard time because they go, why don't you show anything that you do? It's like, well, because you're not here to watch what I do. You're here to watch people who do terrible shit. They're like, how come you don't put out instructionals? I'm like, I don't put out instructionals because
my brand.
Well, there are people who are better at it than me. So like on Tuesdays, for instance, on the YouTube channel, on Tuesdays, I do a Technique Tuesday thing. And I try to find some of the best martial artists I can, and they teach technique because they're better than me, right? I don't want to put out a product that's inferior. I'm going to find the people I can find who are the best at that shit and put that out. Yeah. But like I do have this one video because most of my videos, like I started fighting when I was 15. So like back then, most of my shit then was all on VHS. But I have like some on DVD, and I found one, and I did upload it. And it's like me in this like old school like gi from top to bottom. It's like an old school kickboxer's gi, but it's like urban camo, so it's god awful ugly. It's like the ugliest thing you've ever seen. But our instructor at the time for this kickboxing team was like, you gotta wear it, it's the team uniform. I was like, this is the ugliest, stupidest fucking, but I wear it anyway, right? And so me and this guy are set up, and it's like this was a point fighting match. And we're moving around, and like I just front kick this dude in the fucking face, like as he's like jumping up to try to hit me with something, and it like knocks him out. It's like I like front kick him, and he just crumbles, and he tries to get up, and then he like kind of seizes for a second, but then like his coach made him get back up and continue to fight, and he winds up beating me in that fight. He winds up winning after that.
Wow, good for him.
Yeah, I like after I hit him. Like we kept moving around, and it was a point fighting match. So like after I hit him, obviously 2 points for me, but like we kept going, and then he winds up winning that. Later on down the road, he fights a guy who's a fucking savage, who now is a Hollywood stunt performer. His name is Sammy Vasquez. And so Sammy Vasquez spinning hook kicks him so goddamn hard, I thought he killed him. Like that's how hard he hit. Like when Uriah Hall back in the Ultimate Fighter hook kicked that dude, right? Yeah,
there's so much power on those kicks, man. If you get hit with one, it's just like. So
get this, the guy gets knocked out again from that. I mean, he hit him fucking hard, way harder than I hit him. And I hit him hard. And the guy winds up, like the coach goes up, wakes him up again, and makes him continue to fight again. And he winds up winning the whole goddamn thing. He was knocked out twice in that tournament.
That's shockingly irresponsible and also
yeah, right. Well, like the funny, like I have that clip, right, and I love showing it because it's a great kick. Like I kicked the shit out of him, but he wins. Like I always have to give him that credit. And not only that, but he got knocked out again, way more viciously. Coach again wakes him up, and he wins the entire tournament.
That's
and this is like
crazy.
Yeah, this isn't like a Grand Prix where it takes place over several days. This was all within the same couple hours. Like you fight, you wait. Everybody else fights, you wait. Yeah. Like a jiu-jitsu style tournament, like that bracket system.
I've been to a couple judo tournaments like that as well.
And so like I have to give that dude credit. It was like the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. Now I pray he went to the hospital afterwards because I'm positive he had multiple concussions.
100%.
But like Lethaway is like that. Lethaway, you can knock someone out and you're allowed one revival. It's like a part of the damn rules.
It's called a revival?
That's what I call it. But you're allowed to, like, yeah, if you've been knocked out once, you're allowed recovery time and you can keep fighting.
Yeah. No, if it's not called revival, it fucking should be.
Or a resurrection.
Yeah, for sure, dude. That's amazing, dude. Like that. I mean, because like you see guys like how much time did he get in between the knockout and then when he had?
I don't remember. Like I learned this from Dave Leduc. Like he was telling me about it, and he was like, "Yeah, like you can be knocked out and they'll just wake you back up." And I was like, "Holy shit!"
But I'm talking about the dude you knocked out. So you knocked him out, and then how much time?
Did you get? You weren't supposed to. You weren't supposed to do that. Yeah. Like
he just like got right back up. Like as soon as he woke up, they're like
his coach came over for my knockout. He seized for a second and then he shook it off and came back to on his own. Like it was like almost like a flash knockout.
So
like
his legs went out from under him. Like he was out.
He was out, but then he recovered. The other dude, when Sammy hook kicked him, he was out. We're talking like snoring. and his coach came over and slapped him and got him back too somehow. And like you could tell the dude was out of it, and he was just fighting on instinct and won. I was blown away, blown away. And like, no, you weren't supposed to do that, but those WACO, Nasca, NBL circuits, those are the type of sport karate where you'll see guys like Raymond Daniel, Michael Venom Page, Stephen Thompson. They came from those type of circuits. Like, it's very political, I guess you could say. Like, I hate to bring that up, but it is very true. Most of those fights don't take place in a ring. Like, if you're a black belt, you get the stage and you get to fight on stage, so you get a ton of room to fight, which is awesome. But like,
there's like a circle, right? That like you have to stay inside of.
No. Like literally a platform, just a platform stage. Like if you're lucky. If not, you're probably fighting on carpet. Like that's how it was for a lot of players.
Isn't there a barrier that you guys have to stay inside of, or you just
tape?
I mean, there's like a certain like.
If you're lucky, some tournaments will have mats, but most of them, like some of them won't. Like so, like
is there like a standardized amount of room that you have?
Yeah, so they do measure it out and stuff like that. They'll tape the mat or they'll tape the floor if it's just on the floor. But so I fought several times on just carpet, but then we'd have like sometimes the nicer tournaments would have mats. But like here's a story. Like so we're in where were we? I think it's called the Twin Tower Classics, and I think it was in New York. And back then anyway, obviously that's not there anymore. But like back then
they renamed it now.
Yeah, it's something different. But like back then, it was a big tournament. It was a big deal. And my friend winds up going into like that particular division, the same division as Raymond Daniels. And he draws Raymond Daniels as the first fight in the tournament. And Raymond Daniels is a goddamn savage. He's probably one of the best kickboxers that has ever been. Like he is just truly phenomenal kickboxer. And he winds up drawing Raymond Daniels first. And Raymond Daniels is just kind of playing with him as a warm-up fight. He was just treating him like a warm-up fight. And no offense to my friend. My friend was very talented, but he just was not on that level. And Raymond Daniels spinning hook kicks his nose and hits his nose and moves it to the other side of his cheek. So like his nose was literally bent and not where it was supposed to be. And which by the way, in that particular rule set, you were not allowed to do that much damage because it was like mid to light contact tournament or whatever. But because Raymond Daniels at the time was such a poster child for Nasca that they could not afford for their guy to lose in such a way. So like the rule is that you can arbitrate stuff as long as the next fight had not started yet. Well, we took a chair and we set it in the ring. I mean, the chair we set down was in the ring, and we sat Doug down so we can get an arbitrator. And these sons of bitches started the next fight while we're still in the ring, just so we couldn't arbitrate.
What?
Yeah, this really happened. And it's like, no offense, like I really like Raymond Daniels. Like I got to meet him several times and talk to him several times back in the day. He's the nicest dude in the world, a very humble guy. He's a killer in the ring, don't get me wrong, but he's just a nice person. But like that wasn't his fault that happened. He caused way too much damage. He sent a dude to the hospital, but it wasn't a full contact tournament, so that wasn't supposed to go that way.
And it landed on his nose, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was a beautiful hook kick.
It doesn't take a lot to make the nose, get rearranged. Yeah.
And so like but Nasca at the time, in protection of Raymond Daniels, like started the next fight. I mean, these guys were almost fighting around the chair. I was like, why the fuck would you do this? And then you kind of realize that, some of this stuff is political, Yeah.
Like, for sure. It's like, and it's so funny to think about that stuff because, the whole like genesis of UFC and then where it's grown to now and how much guys are getting paid and like one thing that I don't know if you've been paying attention to this, but like a lot of guys have been haggling over like fighter pay, and Dana's just like this is a fight we've been having for 20 years. He's like we will always be having this conversation, so I just don't get bent out of shape about it. And it's interesting because, it's like, I see both sides of it. It's like, from Dana's perspective, I mean, first of all, he's the CEO and his job is to maximize shareholder value and make as much revenue as possible. So he has to haggle with the fighters. He can't just give them whatever they want. And simultaneously, he has a pretty strong position that it's like, okay, if we wouldn't have built this company, how much money was there in martial arts for competitors? Okay. Like, how is a martial artist we're going to make a living in, outside of like a handful of people prior to us building this organization in the United States. And, you know, I mean, and he's got certainly a strong position there. Like I always said, I was like, if you took Hoist Gracie, right, and in like whatever the first 95, 93, whatever it was, and then you took like, say like, I don't know, like whatever Gracie descendant was now about to fight for the belt, and then you took them back in time and you let them have a conversation. You're like, yeah. So your nephew, he's holding out because he's not going to make more than $500,000 every time that he fights. And Hoist Gracie be like, that's impossible. You're like, no, really. He wants to make sure that he gets at least $750K every time he fights. They like it wouldn't even translate. Like they'd be like, that is impossible. And it's like, you know, like the roots of the sport. But yeah, I mean, anyway, it's just interesting because like that, like I see what the tournaments you're talking about is like that is the genesis of like tournament, you know, competitive martial arts that still exist there. And now there actually is an avenue where people can make real money doing it.
And like that's everywhere. It's interesting because like UFC has helped evolve a lot of martial arts, and the only ones that seem to be getting made fun of are usually the ones that don't choose to evolve. Like karate has representatives in the UFC. You know, jiu-jitsu has representatives in the UFC. Wrestling, boxing, and kickboxing, and Muay Thai, they all have representatives. Like the only arts that people tend to make fun of nowadays are the ones that don't have a representative on that platform. And that's in terms of combat effectiveness, because that used to be UFC's slogan forever, as real as it gets. That was the slogan forever. And that's pretty damn true. I mean, in terms of combat sport, it doesn't get too much, the rule set doesn't get too much more broad other than Pride back in the day, you know, like where you can stomp on people's face.
Yeah.
When it comes to fighters' pay, I just got done watching this amazing docu-series called The Last Stand, and it's about like the Bulls' last championship.
Oh yeah, I watched it. It's amazing.
So good, so good. And there was like something similar that I had seen in that, which was Scottie Pippen was upset about his money.
Oh, fucked, man.
Yeah. Well, the thing is like he has to remember he fucked himself.
100%, he fucked himself.
And so like he's mad at the organization, but what he really should have been mad at was past him, younger version of him, who sat down and signed that contract and agreed.
Or his agent that gave him that advice. Because
exactly. So like whenever this argument comes up, I always try to remind, especially young up and coming fighters, that if you're going to be that guy, you need to make sure that you understand that this is a business. Yeah. The promoters know this is a business, and to them, this is a business. The fighters have this integrity and honor and respect of fighting and martial arts and blah, blah, blah. That's great, but you have to remember that this is also a business, just like your martial arts school. You can have both. You don't just have to have one. You don't have to be a sellout and give up your integrity as a martial artist, and you don't have to just be a martial artist and give up any business sense. You can have both. That's why a lot of fighters pick an agent. They get an agent, somebody who will represent them and give them a better deal. So if you're a guy like, let's see, who's arguing overpay right now? John Jones. Jones,
or you could use Masvidal as the best example, because he just got paid because he held out.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you're going to be those guys, you have to remember that you signed the contract. You're making an agreement with another human being. And to get upset at something you already agreed to me, is hypocritical. I get what they're saying, though, and I do disagree with Dana White about one thing. Dana White's outlook on MMA.
They don't have to fight?
Yeah, well, not just they don't have to fight, because that is true, but what I found really almost like a slap in the face is when he said MMA is not a career, it's a stepping stone.
Yeah, that pissed me off too, actually.
Because that's bullshit. That's like saying NASCAR.
They said it's an opportunity. That's what he said. He said it's not a career, it's an opportunity.
And that is true. It is an opportunity, but as well as a fucking career, right? Yeah. So like, for instance, here's the example he gave, is you can get injured and fighting can no longer be an option for you. Hey, I understand that. That's true. You can get injured. But that's like saying that NASCAR is not a career because I could go blind from some accident outside of NASCAR. NASCAR is still a career. It's still a job. It's the career that I have, right? And it's the career until it's no longer the career, just like any other fucking career that you have, right? Yeah. And so, like, is it a stepping stone? Yes, it's a stepping stone, and you can use that as an opportunity to grow, like people like Ronda Rousey, Paige Van Zant, who else? Randy Couture, there's so many people who have used their MMA status to elevate them outside. And I think that that's great. but that's a slap in the face to guys who are like lifers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you're gonna sit there and tell me that you're gonna tell Conor McGregor that all that money that he made from fighting wasn't career making money? Like, get the fuck out of here.
And I think that's, I mean, I would imagine that if you actually got into a room with Dana and had an intelligent conversation with him about it, we'd be haggling over language, not over concept, because, you know, I think the point that he was probably making, and like I said, I didn't like that. Basically, that, like, I find myself aligned with Dana 98% of the time, because my background is building companies and like startups and stuff. And so, like, I completely see things from the perspective of the person who built the company in a lot of cases. And I look at how a lot of the fighters look at it as exactly how, like, your employees look at it, when you're just like, dude, you don't understand what's happening. Like, you don't understand the financials. You don't understand what's going on. You're looking at it purely from and at the same time, I do agree with some of the position. Anyway, but the point is, in that particular conversation, I found myself being like, come on, man. Like, where he's like, these guys are independent contractors. They don't have to fight. And I'm like, okay, they're independent contractors that are locked into a contract with UFC for 8 more fights. They can't fight anywhere else, and they're fighters. Okay, so just because they get a 1099 at the end of the year instead of a W-2, like, to try to classify them to the public as independent contractors, that's a technicality that's misrepresenting the contractual nature of your guys' relationship. You know what I mean? And like, and then the career thing.
I agree with Dana White about a lot of things that he says. And I agree with you. I think majority of what he says, I agree with. I just didn't agree with that statement. And, you know, when I made the statement about Conor McGregor making all that money, you know, people are going to be like, well, that was the opportunity. Like, yeah, but at the same time, like, not all fighters are going to be that way. They're like, if you want to look at like, fuck, man, I don't know why my words and my names are not coming to me.
Look at Tony Ferguson. It's a perfect example. Like,
I mean, not even Tony Ferguson. If you want to even go further, look at somebody like Clay Guida.
Yeah.
How long has Clay Guida been on the card? Forever. How many fights has he lost? You know, like, he's not like a top 10 guy. You know, like, Clay Guida is just like a guy who was making a career. Here, look at Diego Sanchez. Diego Sanchez definitely, like, earned his stripes early on, but he's still there and he's still fighting. Yep. It's a career for him. Yep. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's a lifer. Or look at Double Champ, the fucking commentator.
Daniel Cormier.
Yes, look at Cormier. He's a lifer. Yeah. Like, for real. Like, and when he's
made real money now.
Yeah, but he's a lifer. I mean, like, all these guys are like in it, and they spent their whole lives dedicating their bodies to being destroyed for other people's entertainment or for a slice of glory that doesn't really hold a value. It's almost priceless, to be honest. But at the end of the day, they still got to get paid. They still got to take care of their bills. You know, and at that level, like, look at GSP. How many people does he come out with? Like 5 dudes. They're all getting paid. Like, all those guys are getting paid. So, like, he's not.
I try to explain that part to people all the time, dude.
You know,
like 10% manager, 10% trainer, 10%. You know, that's just right off the top. Whatever you see them get paid, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, that shit goes away quick. And if they have like a dietitian or a strength and conditioning coach, and, you know, like, the price goes up. Yeah. And so, like, hell, if you want to live at Jackson Winklejohn, be prepared. It ain't cheap, you know? And so, I don't know. I just think that I think that if UFC really wanted to do a better job to pay their fighters more, one, it was a very odd thing with the Reebok deal, which I got it and I kind of didn't get it, because some fighters made out like a bandit because they weren't getting paid shit, and all of a sudden they had a cap. And then some fighters got screwed because they were no longer allowed to have their sponsors in the ring, and some of their sponsors pulled out because that was why they were sponsors in the first place. It was weird. But then, like, now they have Venom, and I haven't even looked over. I don't even know what that deal is. And, you know, I just find it interesting. I think that if you really want fighters to get paid more, stop having so many goddamn fights on a card. That's just my opinion. Like, if you take those fights, right, and rather than having, like, what is it? How many fights they have on a fucking card? It's ridiculous. And, like, and for each fight,
you're saying less fighters, less fighters, more fights for the fighters that they have.
Well, no, just less fights on a card. So, like, let's say I have, like, think about boxing, like professional boxing, right? Now, granted, boxing does have an opportunity for more rounds. Doesn't always go the full rounds, but it has more opportunity for more rounds. But they don't have nearly as many fights on a boxing card. And those fighters are getting paid fucking millions of dollars. Even undercard guys are getting paid an assload of money in boxing. They're getting paid fairly well. But like if you look at like MMA guys, for instance, if you're trying to take like, let's say we have 10 fights, $100, right? Well, for each fight, I have 2 fighters that need to be paid. So that's 20 fighters. Now I have to divide 100 by 20. Why not just have, let's say, 5 fights on a card, and then you take that exact same amount of money, that 100, and then you divide it that way. Rather than trying to pay out so many fighters, pay out 20, just pay that amount of, have that fight, just less cards in the goddamn fight. And if you want, have another card for those other fighters, and then another card, and then another card. Like if you look at like most professional sports are going on like all the goddamn time. You know what I'm saying? There sports are going on all the time, right? UFC, if it's going to be going on all the time and you have all these hungry young fighters, split the fucking cards up a little bit, right? Stop having so many fighters on a card, because if you do that, each card will have more money for those fighters to be paid.
I wonder about that. Like, it's just like, so like right now they got fights every weekend, and that's partially because they're catching up from COVID. But like, I wonder if they did, you know, fights every Friday and Saturday as opposed to just on Saturdays, and they chop the cards up, if what the viewership would do.
Well, I mean, think about how many fights, there's like 2 or 3 fights that aren't even televised that go on.
Well, lots of it. I mean, like almost everything is on ESPN Plus now. You know, like that's like you need to have ESPN Plus to watch everything. And I mean, at least that's how I do it.
You know, like during the week, let some of those undercard guys fucking fight. You know, let those guys fight. Like, let them have their own like limelight. And like your higher up, your top 50%, let them make it to the weekend fights.
That's true, man. Actually, because like, you know, like a person who's going to tune in at 3:30 p.m. to watch the early prelims,
all the way till 2 a.m. on the East Coast.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, man.
So
if you
how long that is
to like a primetime spot on a Wednesday, you probably get the same amount of viewers as you do for like the early prelim. Although I guess the early prelims for you guys is 6:30, which is a lot more kind of tenable. But
I mean, think about that. It's if like, let's say hypothetically we start at 6 and the fights go till 2 in the morning, which
that's
sometimes
crazy. I didn't even think about that. They're going that late for you guys. Like sports on the West Coast are so much better.
You know what I'm saying? That's 6 fucking hours. Like, how about we just not make it that? How about we not make it 6 hours? How about we make it 3 hours worth of fights, and I guarantee you people will still tune in the exact same as if there was 6 hours of fucking fights. I fucking promise.
So the main event on these fights, generally they come out at like 11:30 p.m. for you guys. Like
it's usually like 10. Main card.
I'm talking like the main event, like the main, like so like the main pay-per-view.
Sometimes 1 o'clock in the morning.
Gosh, that is brutal, man.
Yeah, and then like I'm one of those people. I'm one of those asshole suckers that will sit there and watch from the time it starts all the way till the main event. I watch all of them.
Yeah,
and so,
it's a lot easier when it's when it's 9 o'clock and not midnight.
Yeah, exactly. But like, because I'm on the East Coast, so over here on the East Coast, you know, like we're 3 hours ahead.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like fuck. Like, just get to the goddamn fight. But like, that's how it feels. And in my mind, I'm like, why do they have so many goddamn fights on one card? Why? All these fighters are complaining. That's because you're paying 1,000 fucking fighters in this one night. Why not half that shit? Now you have probably the same amount of money, the equivalent to the same amount of money, and you have less time to sit there, or less fighters to pay, you know, at that time for that card. You know, like, split that shit up. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's not how it works. Maybe I'm completely off base. But in my mind, it seems simple like that. But
yeah, it's possible. I mean, I'm sure that these guys have all kinds of modeling to maximize shareholder value. But I don't know. So I got about like 5-10 minutes left, and there was a couple of these when I was looking early on that I wanted to bring up specifically, because there's actually one where I was like, you know what? I mean, I don't know, like, this isn't something that I would pay to be trained in, but like the one violent literature.
Yes.
Like this guy, he's kind of like, this is not bad, like guys about to stab you technique, right? Like this is basically, I mean, it's, it's kind of funny, but it's
so
like.
The funny parts for me in that one is there's a part where he opens the book and closes the book around the guy's hand, and then
I haven't seen that. Oh, I did just see that. Yeah, that's not gonna work.
So like, And you know, the interesting thing is like not so much just the technique, because obviously if I had a book versus a knife, I'm going to use the goddamn book. I'm going to use what I have,
Yeah.
right? Whatever I have. But like how nonchalant, he just barely moves his wrist around and like disarms the guy and like moves his whole entire arm. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen what a real like stabbing looks like, but it looks something like this.
Yeah. And
So,
I've seen what a real like Krav Maga like disarming looks like, and it looks a lot more you know, than that.
yeah, there's like so many of these. It's incredible how many frauds there are in the martial arts industry, and like, and obviously it kind of boils down to like cult like behavior in my mind, you know, and like there will be a lot of people who criticize my views on things, and that's fine. I'm open to dialogue and I'm open to open discourse, and I don't think that everybody should agree all the time on everything, because that would be really fucking weird.
Yeah.
But I do agree that people have the right to train and do whatever it is that they want to do. I'm just kind of dumbfounded because I'm the guy doing it. I'm the guy trying to at least call it out and trying to make some kind of a difference for people who haven't joined martial arts or don't know that martial arts cults exist, because they very much do exist. And I just want to shine a light so that way, hopefully, let's say grandma who hears our grandson go, I want karate lessons, and starts looking to try to get her grandson into karate lessons, doesn't wind up going to some kind of cult, not realizing, because she doesn't know any martial arts, not realizing that it's a cult, you know,
Yeah.
and get this kid sucked into something that might get him harmed, raped, or molested or abused, which happens all the time. Like, I post once a day, every day for the last 8 years, and I have not run out of content. Ever. Still haven't. I still got shit waiting to be posted.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah.
That is so funny, dude. It's like, yeah, and the guy that is talking about how he took on 200 people and he's acting it out. It's like, dude.
Now that one's interesting. So that one is actually super duper interesting. That's the kind of shit that people don't really see on the back end. So I got like, I think over 100 DMs from people from that area who follow that guy, who were standing up for him 100%, that believed it. And their answer always to me was,
Who were
no
these
matter
200
how,
people?
oh, I don't think they exist. They're not real.
Well,
But
no, I
the
know,
people,
but I'm saying, like, in their mind, if they're defending him, it's like, where are their 200 attackers
where
going
are
at?
the bodies?
When has
You know,
that ever
like,
happened? Like, when
because
have 200 people descended on one dude? Like, that's not something that happens.
and why? Like,
Yeah,
that's never
that's what I'm
happened.
saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so the guy did this interview. That interview is like 45 minutes long on YouTube. You can actually watch it. And that interview is all about that fight. And his student, who is very famous, is Chinya, whatever, right? She's like got 100.45 million followers on YouTube. So in Indonesia, she's like very well respected, looked up to as a martial artist. But that goes to show you what the bar is, right? So like they'll take these videos. Here's a prime example. I actually talked about it today. So this is something that they actually believed was real. So these people tried to sell this as real. They had a cigarette, and they put a cigarette in a vise, and the cigarette was just sticking out. And then the guy takes a sword and he swipes the sword, and it seems to go through the cigarette without the cigarette being cut whatsoever, right? That's bullshit, right? That is utter bullshit. I can't take this pen and make it go through the pencil without breaking the pencil or cutting the pencil.
Right.
That's how the shit works. But they sell it as real, and people over there eat that shit up. They think it's 100% real.
Wait, so the sword goes through the cigarette without cutting the
Like a
cigarette?
ghost. Like a ghost.
And so what? I don't understand what
And they call it like some kind of special technique, and they try to sell this as a real technique, which is where I have the problem. If they called that entertainment, I would not have a problem with it.
But why would that be a good technique? You're like, look, I can make my sword totally ineffective and invisible.
Who knows? But like that's the kind of stuff that they sell. Or like there's another one where like she like hits a rock, and it's quite clearly Adobe After Effects. I mean, it's not, it's like one of her older videos, and the rock splits in half, right? And they try to ham it up. So the problem isn't that they're doing these things. That I've never had a problem with that. But if you mislabel poison and call it orange juice, you're going to get people to drink fucking poison, right? And so that's what they're doing, is they're mislabeling things that should be presented as theatrical, and they're labeling them as real hardcore self-defense. Like that interview where he's talking about fighting 200 people who had machetes. Like, I'm sorry, you will die. But yet they're people who follow them are so brainwashed. And another thing about that culture, by the way, is there's something called Tanaga Dalam. Have you ever heard of that? So Tanaga Dalam is like their cultural version of chi, their magical energy powers. And because of Tanaga Dalam, I've seen kids slit their throats. This is shit that I can't post. I've seen kids hack their arms. I've seen kids run over and killed by trucks, all because they believed that the spiritual energy would save them. The truck thing is, I talk about often because it really is stuck in my head. I see some shit that I wish upon nobody to see in my job. I truly do. I see shit that truly keeps me up at night sometimes, and it makes me want to work harder. So hopefully I can save somebody from having to go through this. But here's what one of the things that I got sent that unfortunately I can't really post, but there is a small clip of it in our trailer for our documentary. So like it zooms in and you see like kids laying down. They had to be between the ages of 8 to 13. And they all are there for a martial arts demonstration because they're wearing their sashes. Then it pans out and you notice that there's a line of like maybe 8 of these kids. As it pans out more, you see a huge audience. I mean, it had to be thousands of people are watching this demonstration. As it pans back even more, you see a ramp, like a wedge that you would use for a car to go over. Then you notice the kid is like here, but the ramp is like here. So there's a big dip from the top of the ramp. Then as it backs up more, you see a military grade diesel truck. It's a big fucking truck. And then you realize what's about to happen. The truck starts to go forward and it comes off the ramp and it lands on top of the first kid, kills him instantly. Then it runs over and it stops on top of the second kid. And you start to see his legs shake. The third kid is smart. He dips out. He just says, fuck this, and moves out of the way. And then it runs over the other kids, and the other kids actually seem to make it out without being scathed because the truck had momentum. Now, the first kid is dead. He's dead as shit. The second kid is literally twitching. They run over to try to revive these kids, and the first kid is dead. Like, they couldn't do anything. The second kid, they finally revive him, thank God. But who knows what type of permanent damage that he had. But you have to understand that that chi Tanaga Dalam bullshit is so ingrained in their culture that thousands of people watch this and they all thought that that chi was going to save those kids' lives, that they would not get hurt in this. They were there to be entertained. They were there to witness a demonstration. Like, I saw another video of a kid. This happens a lot. Like, you can type in Tanaga Dalam and Indonesian shit like that, where they'll take swords and they'll like try to see like they're cutting themselves, but they don't really cut themselves because the sword is dull, you dumbasses. But some of the younger kids don't know that. They don't know that it's a parlor trick and they truly believe it. And so they'll do it. And I saw one kid do it across his throat and fucking spill out. Like, he fucking died. This kid was only like 8 years old. Like, the shit that I see because of martial arts malpractice is fucking nauseating. I saw one thing, right, where these people like to do these hardcore reality self-defense training where they're boxing in the street. And they're just moving around boxing, and one guy gets knocked out. When he lands, he hits his head on the concrete, and you just start to see a pool of blood immediately. The next thing after that was just a picture of him dead in the hospital.
Yeah.
Because reality training. People are so fucking stuck on some of the stupidest shit that they could care less about other people's health and safety over their own reputations. Yeah. Oh, well, we're hardcore, so we do it real. No, you do it stupid, you dumbasses.
Yeah. Yeah, that shit, like that. I mean, again, I that is like a nightmare that I've had a million times where I'm like, fuck, man, like, because once I actually started training and I saw that, like, with a boxing glove I can hit a person and they can go to sleep. It's like I've never touched a person outside of a ring ever after that, just because I'm like, I just have this nightmare where it's like, okay, well, I mean, you know, I haven't fought anybody in years, but like, you know, hit dude, he falls, like. The canvas is not canvas, it's a pavement, and they'll hit their head and they'll die. You know, like, and there's so many fights in UFC that you watch and you see the way that a guy, his head bounces off the canvas. You're like, just imagine that's a street, man. That's, the dude is, I mean, curtain call in many, but yeah, man, it's scary. But I gotta jump. I gotta call in 15 minutes. I gotta jump on. But dude, I appreciate the time. This was super fun, man. This is gonna.
Hey, man, I appreciate you having me on. I love talking shop, dude. Hopefully you had a good time, and I appreciate you having me.